Well, good evening, everyone. Hello. I wanted to just do a quick intro. I've got a movie to show you. This is one of my favorite movies. It's an older movie, but it's something that George used to, we used to actually play in the classroom. It's on the brain. So obviously I have a little brain right here. Now, not a little brain, actually. This is supposedly, this is supposed to be the actual size. No, that can't be because that's a little bigger than mine. This is Einstein's brain. We've borrowed it. George used to use this as an illustration in the classroom. We talked about the different types of brain and brain activities. I am really not going to go that in depth with it. The concept, though, I'm assuming almost everybody understands and knows. I don't want to separate it too much. That we have two hemispheres in the brain. Does everyone understand that? So there's two hemispheres. Excellent. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. The topic is fragmented thinking. Fragmented thinking. Now this came to me a few weeks ago. I forgot the scenario that happened, but I was thinking, I was in a conversation. And I said something, and the person heard something else. And then we went in a story that I have no idea where it went to because that's not what I had said in the first place. So I was thinking how fragmented thinking can misconstrue a conversation. Fragmented thinking can misconstrue my perception. So I know I jumped right into it and I didn't start doing the announcements. So obviously let me just quickly do announcements. We have an Omega 2 that starts this week. Tonight's the last Monday night workshop for the month of July. August Omega 1, there's still room available. I'm going to say there is an August Omega 1, right? August Omega 1, there is room available. This month we do not have an Omega 1. It's we have the 2. The 2 is still full from what I understand. And of course we have an 8 coming up. I'm sorry, a 4, an Omega 4 coming up. I'm working on Omega 8. Which is one of the reasons why I've been playing around with the brain. So back to the idea of the brain now. Fragmented thinking. I spent 23 years as a massage therapist, and in my massage therapy you had to learn anatomy and physiology. So I had to learn about the cells. I used to sit there and think, seriously? Why? Can you just tell me the muscles? Why do I need to know about the cells and the synapses and whatnot? But I found it intriguing. The idea about the synapses is nerve endings. Obviously, this is why you learn it, to learn about the nerves and how they manipulate muscles and whatnot. The synapses allows a nerve ending to communicate with another nerve ending. So that's the communication. So it's called a synapses. We have firing in our brain, millions of firing neurons off telling the brain what to do. As a matter of fact, before I even lift my arm, there's already been the signal sent to lift my arm, but I don't think that. So I do not have a degree in the brain. I'm giving you a layman's understanding of the brain. When I think about the synapses and I think about my brain and the connections in my brain, I want to just go to memory, the role in memory. So the synapses play a really large role. The neurotransmitters activate receptors across the synaptic neurons, which is strengthened and gives us memory. So it stores information and recalls information. Now when I have a broken synapses, my recall of the memory may not be correct. Have you had that experience where you recall a memory and you discover it's not the right memory? We used to talk about this. George would talk about this in the classroom. He said there was a story of a woman who had several attempts at suicide. Was that thunder? Sorry, I just got distracted. Fragmented thinking. So I wanted to illustrate that for you. So there was a story about a woman who had several attempts at suicide. And in her counseling, the counselor would talk to her, and she'd always talk about what her favorite memory was swinging on a tree, a big swing in a tree. And as the counselor worked with this woman, she discovered there was no swing and there was no tree. That this woman had created this memory, this place, to escape the horrific events that were happening to her when she was young. So her mind would take her off to a place that didn't even exist. But in her memory, she recalled it as an event. Now, I've had this very strange thing happen to me as well. Most of you know I have a fairly good memory. Used to have, let's just say that. I used to have a fairly good memory. My grandfather had a photographic memory. So I feel like part of that trickled down somewhere. So I've got a pretty good memory. It's not photographic, but it's pretty good. Now, my dreams are very vivid. When I dream, it is like this. This is what I see. And there are times, even in my dream, I'll stop and say, is this a dream or is this really happening? How can I tell this is a dream? So I've done a little research and some self-education on ways to recognize a dream versus reality. One way that I recognize nightmares especially is 95% of the time when I'm having a nightmare, I'm in the house I grew up in. And as soon as I recognize that I'm in the house that I grew up in, the nightmare stops and I wake up. So that's a little key that I discovered. I also learned that one thing that you can do in your dreams is look for your hands. If you can look for your hands and start to manipulate things in the dream, you actually can use your dream for education. So I don't want to go too much on the dream aspect, but I'm going back to the idea that there are times when I recall things in my mind and I cannot tell if it really was a memory or a dream that I had. So I've had many teachers show up and sometimes I sit and think, was that a real teacher or did I see that person in a dream? Because there are times in my dreams I go to school. I go to this great big huge temple, Greek looking thing. I actually love it. There's like circular steps and we all sit and there's some guy in a robe. I'm sure it's George or Socrates back then or Pythagoras, whoever he was back then. I think he was considered Pythagoras. Side note, we had this one woman who worked on past life regressions, and she told us that me and George had like 20 lifetimes together. I'm like, yeah, great, I can't get it. I gotta be his student for 20 years. I still don't, I mean 20 lifetimes, and I still haven't gotten it yet. So she said, even back then, in Pythagoras, I was his student I was his support system, whatever. Anyway, back here. Another example of fragmented thinking. When we have a fragmented thought, sometimes we can just travel off onto another tangent. Have you ever had this where you're in a conversation with someone and before you know it, you're talking about something entirely different? Yes. That's the lack of continuity and fragmented thinking at play. So back to the idea of me. In our brain, with our brain, the right hemisphere, that's right, the right hemisphere operates the left side. The left hemisphere operates the right side. The left hemisphere is often considered the dominant. It's the logical aspect. It's the one who figures out solutions. It's the one that thrives for discipline, rules. It's the one that likes to have information. It's the part of me that it's the analytical, figures things out. It's also where the speech is involved. On the left side is my speech. Now remember, the left operates the right side. The right hemisphere is the creative one. This is where all the artists are born. If you're an extremely right-sided person, you're very haphazard. You're very creative, but don't care about discipline. You don't want discipline. You want freedom to express. So it's the right hemisphere that invoked the 60s. Come on, that was kind of a joke. Do you remember the 60s? Were you all alive in the 60s? So it's the right hemisphere that free love, free thinking, let's just do whatever we want. And the music, now that is pertaining to the right. As a matter of fact, the music center is on the right side, is directly opposite of the music center on the left side. So when I have both my brains in balance, and I have a balanced brain, obviously, fragmented thinking not occurring. But when one is out of balance, when I favor one to the other, I could say that I'm out of balance. Now, I just wanted to use this as an illustration, mostly because I wanted to get a picture of what happens when we have fragmented thinking. Now, the video I want to show you, it's an old video, so it's kind of cute. It has a little jump in it, so let it keep playing. It's going to go through it. This video talks about the brain, the power of the brain, and what happens when our brain is at odds with each other. There's a very good scene, you're going to see this is a cute little scene where the corpus callosum, which connects the right to the left hemisphere, in some individuals, the corpus callosum is either missing or is intentionally cut. They used to do this for people with epilepsy. They'd cut the corpus callosum to stop the fits happening. I know somebody who actually had his corpus callosum cut. And what you see in the video, he actually does. When the corpus callosum is cut, the right side operates the left side operates the right, and you'll see the hands actually fighting with each other because the two are fighting against each other. That corpus callosum isn't there to mediate the thinking happening. So I just want us to think about the left brain is logical, the right brain is creative. These are two separate personalities, two thinking patterns. So we have logic, creativity. Neither one is right or wrong, better or worse. Together they make a balanced brain. But what happens when we're out of balance, and what happens when the fragmented thinking affects one versus the other? For example, as I stated, when my memory retrieves a memory that is inaccurate, who fills in the picture? That's something to consider. So I want you, this is about 15 minutes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this little video, and I'll come back when it's done. Look how pretty your brain is.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. John Barrymore as Henry Jekyll, idealist and philanthropist, by profession, a doctor of medicine. This classic film tells the story of Dr. Jekyll's secret experiment with the brain. He found a potion that can cut off one part of the brain and let a hidden self emerge. But to his worried friend, Dr. Lanyon, he says only, "I tell you, Lanyon, we haven't begun to discover what science can do with the body and mind of man." Laboratory that night, Dr. Jekyll takes the potion. The evil Mr. Hyde. Two personalities in one body. And as Hyde, he plunges into a second life. Women. Opium. Evil. As Dr. Jekyll, he lives his normal life. But he never knows when Mr. Hyde will reappear.
The story of Jekyll and Hyde is all fantasy, of course, but as intriguing now as when Robert Louis Stevenson wrote the story almost a century ago. Because the mystery of the brain has always fascinated the human race. And though today researchers have unlocked some of the brain's secrets. Its powers are still fascinating, and much of the mystery remains. For the brain is, after all, only an organ of tissues and blood. Yet somehow it generates the conscious mind.
It's normal patterns. But a disturbed brain reveals something different, as we might have found in the mind of our old friend, Mr. Hyde.
Dr. Jekyll is now Hyde permanently. He refuses to see anyone. Not even his fiancée, Millicent. She's frantic with worry. All London now fears the evil Mr. Hyde. And Hyde has been known to visit Jekyll's house. Now Hyde and Jekyll struggle. Mr. Hyde wins. Millicent is terrified. Where is Dr. Jekyll? How can she know that Jekyll and Hyde are struggling in the same body? Jekyll wins. Jekyll has swallowed the poison he'd carried hidden in his ring when the experiments began. He can live no longer as Mr. Hyde. His friend finds him and understands.
Actually, the brain of Mr. Hyde killed the brain of Dr. Jekyll. The remarkable fact is, all of us possess not one, but two almost separate brains. Now, you may recall that the brain is divided into two hemispheres. In most people, the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. The right hemisphere, the left side of the body. Normally, the two hemispheres cooperate in performing all the brain's tasks. The hemispheres send messages back and forth through a network of neurons called the corpus callosum. In this journey down into the brain's depths, we can see the connection as a solid bridge of tissue between the two hemispheres. But the fact still remains that these are separate halves, and they have their own different ways of responding. In most of us, the left hemisphere thinks in an orderly, logical way. It seeks the discipline of rules and restrictions. It likes to analyze, to dissect out the parts of a problem. It excels at some types of mathematics and manufactures our speech. But the right half is impulsive and haphazard. It leaps from thought to thought, or more properly, from image to image, because the right hemisphere thinks primarily in visual terms. It perceives things as entire pictures, not as ideas. The right side is the brain's creative half. It synthesizes rather than analyzes. And though it doesn't usually speak, it somehow seems appropriate that it can sing. The center for music perception lies in the right hemisphere opposite the center for speech in the left hemisphere. Despite their cooperation, though, the two halves of a brain seem to need a leader. Because the left hemisphere speaks and deals in logical decisions, we describe it as the dominant side. In our daily skirmishes in which we must propose reasonable arguments, it's the dominant left side that speaks. We've learned all this from people who suffered severe epilepsy, because at one time the only treatment was to cut the corpus callosum. With communications severed, the left and right hemispheres were free to express themselves, each without influence of the other. Here we see a patient whose corpus callosum has been separated. He's performing an experiment which tests his right hemisphere. He has been asked to recreate a red pattern by manipulating a set of marked blocks. His right hemisphere, which deals with problems of spatial arrangement and which also controls the left hand, easily solves the problem. Given the same problem, the left brain, which acts through the right hand, seems befuddled and fails miserably in solving the same task. As the left brain continues trying to solve the problem, the right brain, which sees the solution with frustrating clarity, tries to join in, commanding the left hand. However, its aid is prevented, and the left brain continues to direct the right hand in endless futility. When asked to give the problem a go with both hands, the patient finds the two squabbling among themselves, the right hand trying, with what seems to be spite, to undo what the left hand has accomplished. Fortunately, most of us have normal brains, with both hemispheres acting in harmony. Fortunately, because even a stroll in the woods demands far more of the brain than the moving of blocks. But above and beyond the realm of physical tasks, your brain becomes you, the conscious human being. It is the you who grows through childhood and loves a family. It is the you who will marry, start a family, and continue the human saga. It's the brain that guides you into the world and rushes you through life in a fervor of desires and deadlines. It's the brain that molds you into society. It's the brain that analyzes life to understand the universe. And it's the brain that conceives monuments to what it cannot understand. But we and our brains never cease to look for reasons. And we can see the human mind change from reverence to comprehension of the incomprehensible.
On the other hand, this brain that's given us the power of understanding has also given us the searing stresses and terrifying dangers of the 20th century. And I think you'll agree that the great challenge of the 21st century will not be to control nature. It will be the far more difficult job of understanding and controlling our brains, which is to say, our human behavior.
Thank you. Now, I found that very fascinating. The idea, look, my corpus callosum is fighting. What do I do? The idea how the two brains were fighting with one another, And of course, that's what we were discussing, is our fragmented thinking. Take a moment and talk to somebody about that last video that you just watched. All right, if I can just have your attention, I just needed a moment there, so thank you. As I stated, this is something that we used to show in the classrooms. We talked about the brain. And I was thinking how some of the illustrations we used to use, but I want to talk to you for a moment. I recently read an article where scientists have now claimed that they can successfully do a brain transplant. So successfully do a brain transplant. Now, I know that this is not new because back in the 50s or 60s, I'm going to say, a Russian scientist successfully transplanted a brain out of a monkey, out of a chimpanzee. And the chimpanzee survived, I think it was like 3 hours. And what they did was they had one chimpanzee, which had no education. The second chimpanzee, they taught it sign language and specific codes and whatnot. And then when they did the surgery, they transferred the brains. And the chimpanzee that had no awareness, that's the one that was operating on the other one, they just let die. But this one that it was operating, it answered all the questions. So what they assumed was they transferred the information. Now the question that's posed is, does the personality change as well? So therefore, can someone, let's say, live forever just by transporting your brain from body to body to body? That's amazing to me. There's a new movie coming out. Mark's son told me about this. It's where this guy died. I'm going to butch this up, but this guy dies, and I guess his job now is to prevent the bad souls from returning back to Earth. So he's like trying to gather the souls and send them back to where they're supposed to go. But he's seen as an old man, an old Chinese guy, even though it's a young... R.I.P.D. R.I.P.D. Rest in peace, that's it. R.I.P.D. So he's seen as this old Chinese guy, but he's really a young man. And then the old guy that's his partner is seen as this young, voluptuous woman. It's really funny. But the idea is that the perception has changed. So anyway, that's the concept I was thinking of, is if you could transport your brain to another body, you could live forever. Now, for those of you who know anything about cryogenics, Walt Disney was very invested in cryogenics. As a matter of fact, I believe Walt Disney is on ice right now, along with a few other individuals waiting for the day to be able to either revive them or transport their brain into another body. Now, this sounds like science fiction that I grew up with, but so is this. Scotty, beam me up. I mean, we never had little technology like this. This is pretty much a computer in my hand, essentially. So technology increases. I liked what he said at the very end, how the 21st century, the challenge will be to control not only just our brain, but our behavior. And I was thinking that's quite funny how this is how behavior has started to show up. Interviews, you don't go on a job interview, or you don't fill out applications, you go online. So you don't have to talk to anybody. When it comes to interactions, we can just call if you want to go out and play. Hey, can you come over? Instead of actually walking outside. The Wii's, we don't have to go outside and play tennis, just play inside. So it's almost like technology is taking over reality. And there is a new generation coming up with this is where they might, just as I struggle with the differentiation between a dream and a memory, they will struggle with reality versus computer delusion. So their reality is going to be altered. So I'm curious to see, hoping I won't last this long to see how it unfolds, but curious to see how the next generation, how it unfolds for them. So I went through and I was thinking about perception. So my brain, perception is based upon the 5 senses. What I see, what I hear, what I taste, what I smell, and how I feel. That gives me a perception. This is hot, this is cold. Also, my likes and dislikes come into play. For example, sweet versus salty. You very rarely will find an individual who likes both, sour and sweet. You won't find someone who likes both. They'll either be a person who likes the sour lemon drops or someone who really likes the sugar. The people who like the salt versus, what's the opposite of the salt one? I've lost that one. I thought there's 4. It's sweet, sour, salt, and...
Vinegar?
No, vinegar and salt go together.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to have to come up.
Sour?
No, it's sweet and sour, salty, and the opposite is salt, which I cannot remember. That's okay. There's 4 main taste buds.
Savory?
It might be savory. That might be it.
Bland.
So, bland is when your senses, when the senses stop operating, which happens a lot in older individuals. They stop having the taste buds operating, so they'll eat anything anymore, and they'll lose their sense of smell too, and hearing. If you've been around older individuals, that's what occurs. They start losing their hearing, their eyesight. All the 5 senses start to dissipate because they're withdrawing from. That was an assumption. I'm saying that they're withdrawing from their body. It was intriguing watching George as he aged, and of course progressed with his disease. He used to have his favorite food, and then towards the end it was like he didn't even want it anymore. He never complained about the food I used to give him, and then he would be like, I don't want to eat this anymore, which was so unlike him, because naturally I'm a good cook, so it couldn't possibly be my food. But the idea that the senses changed, and I read up on this, so I knew what to expect, so we had to change over, and except he never got tired of ice cream. I don't think anybody will ever get tired of ice cream. So our perceptions are based upon the 5 senses. That's the predominantly function of a brain. The primary function of my brain is to create perceptions. I like this, I dislike this. This is comfortable, this is uncomfortable. I want to search this, I don't want to search this. What my curiosity leads me. So no one can exactly identify what creates a personality. What's the difference between my brain and Jeffrey Dahmer's brain? Or my brain and the Boston bomber? I mean, we never can tell what separates or creates. We all can have the same experience. As a matter of fact, look at your siblings. This is a curious thing. I've always thought about this. If we both have the same parents, why do we not all look alike? I mean, you would assume it's the same genes, so why are we all different? I mean, the siblings. So, and then in the sibling family, like in my family, we have 4 children, all 4 children. We have similar characteristics, but our behaviors are all different. We all have completely and totally different personalities. What created that? We grew up in the same environment. So what created personalities? Now this I have no desire to solve tonight. Just a question to throw out there. But it makes me think about the idea that my brain is based upon perceptions. And if I have fragmented thinking, how much are my perceptions influencing my fragmented thinking? Or are my fragmented thoughts interrupting my perceptions? So if I have a fragmented thought, it changes my perception. Or can my perception create a different thought? So that's a balance. I lean more towards the idea that my fragmented thinking disrupts my perception. That if I don't have correct connections, the synapses are not working well, I'm going to create a different perception, which will change my thinking. I'm assuming that's true, but I'm not sure. So, back to the idea of fragmented thoughts. My mind went to newborns. Parents who have newborns. Anybody here have a newborn? You ever experience having a newborn? A baby? Newborns? So when the baby's born, first 2-3 days, did it say, Mom, I'd like to have some milk right now? Not that I'm aware of. Most infants don't speak. So a parent, a new parent, is at the mercy of guessing. Do you want your diaper changed? So the first couple of weeks is easy. Eat, sleep, poop. Eat, sleep, poop. You got the rhythm down every 2 hours. But then as the child starts to develop, as the baby begins to develop, it starts staying awake more. And the more it stays awake, the more fascinated it is with the world around it. When those moments occur, parents don't really know what you're looking for. So a baby can be looking over and like, oh, do you want the rattle? Do you want the sleepy bear? Do you want the nightlight? So we start guessing. Now, intuition might take into play the connection that you have with your children. I don't know. All I know is somehow parents figure it out. They figure out what their child's looking for. As the baby begins to evolve, turns into a toddler. Now, toddler years are fun. Not. Because now they can move at a very fast pace. It used to be, and then we like relished the day where they just would sleep all day. Now they're running everywhere, so you have to run after them. Now their verbal hasn't really come into play yet, so I'm looking at a 1.5-year-old. They do the jibber jabber, make their own language. Twins, as a matter of fact, create their own language between the two of them, which is not the English language, but it's something they can both understand so that they communicate with. So, back to the idea of the toddler. But the toddler has motor functions, and the motor function allows it to point, and it can point at something that it wants. It makes it easier for us. However, if the child points up to a shelf that has 15 items on it, do we know which item it's looking for? No, because it's jibber jabber, we don't understand, so then we start taking down each item. You want this? You want this? No, no, and the more you do not find the item, the more frustrated the child gets. Have you ever had this child? And then they're like, fine, just take it all. So, we would never do that. We're always gentle with our children. When it comes to the development of the brain, once speech comes into play, it's easier for us to communicate with our children. I'll never forget the first time my granddaughter spoke a sentence and remembered it. Like, you know, when you take them shopping and I want this, I want that, you put it in the basket, and then when you get to the front, you take it out of the basket because you know they don't remember it's in the basket. And then the day comes where they remember it's in the basket, and then you say, honey, we'll get it next week, because you know they're going to forget. And then comes the day where they say, you said we were going to get this. Oops. So now you have to start telling the truth to your children. Once the communication is established, we can see that's a synapses between human beings. So it's like a corpus callosum. We are now connecting. I have the ability to create structure in my language. I use nouns and pronouns, verbs to create sentences. By using those, you understand because you have the same synapses in your mind. You understand nouns, verbs, you connect sentences, boom, we have a connection. If I start speaking incompletely, you get frustrated. You can't understand what I'm saying. Does anybody see the movie Bruce Almighty? Okay, so that's Jim Carrey. Buffalo, he's in Buffalo, a guy that wants to be a news anchor. Jim Carrey, everybody know who Jim Carrey is, very funny guy. So there's a scene where it's Jim Carrey and who's the other gentleman? Steve Carell, thank you. Steve Carell is the new anchor. Jim Carrey is furious. Jim Carrey has been blessed with God's abilities. So Steve Carell, I apologize, I ran out of the house and I forgot this. Mark had put this all together on a DVD. I wanted you to see it because it's very funny, but sorry. You're just going to get my impersonation of it. So Jim Carrey is furious that Steve Carell gets to be the anchor. So here's Steve Carell, his first night. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And Jim Carrey, with God's powers, is in the back. And he starts doing this thing with his throat. So Steve Carell goes, and can't speak. So he keeps trying. He's like, and so finally someone gets him a glass of water. He drinks his water. He's good. Logical settings. So as you're watching the movie, it's very funny. But the woman who's sitting next to him is like, oh my God, my anchor's just lost it. I mean, because there's no communication. Obviously, that's what's happened. There's no communication. So in that instance, it's quite funny because obviously Steve Carell's trying to say something and Bruce Almighty, Jim Carrey's character, is changing that. So that's what happens when you have one thought and you can't express it. Now, those of you who are familiar with autism, same thing. An autistic individual is not stupid. As a matter of fact, many of them are quite brilliant. They just lack the ability to get the information out, and that causes such frustration. There are some who are savants. As a matter of fact, I just saw an article on this. An 11-year-old autistic boy, I want to say he's in Boston, I can't remember where. His mother, this was on the Good News Network. Does anybody see this one? So he's 11 years old, he's autistic, didn't speak a word for many years. His mom would send him to the regular special needs school. But one day she discovered he was playing with shapes and patterns, so she took him out of school and let him start doing his own thing. She thought she would start educating him on her own. And one day he used to love to look at the stars, so she took him to the planetarium. And to her surprise, when the gentleman asked the question, her son's hand shot up and he gave the answer. And what she discovered is every time he gave an answer, he had the correct answer, and some of them were very difficult. He's 11 years old. I think he started doing that when he was 9. So she discovered, holy mackerel, everyone's saying my son can't speak. he's autistic, but he's a genius. So he's 11 years old, he's in Cambridge right now, an 11-year-old attending college, and he's teaching. And one thing he said, I saw, he's got a TED Talks thing, and he did this little talk about how, I want to say it was Nostradamus. Was he around when the plague was around? It was one very great thinker who was around when the plague was around, so they closed the educational system because the plague, everyone's dying. And he said, you know, just because you can't learn by education doesn't mean you can't learn. So you should never stop learning. So this 11-year-old kid is telling everyone this. So his connections are different. So even though he can receive, he has the inability to express unless it's something that he is a genius in, and boom, he showed up. So that's the fragmented thinking. There's another part, this was also funny, The Night at the Museum. Has anyone ever seen that one? Yeah. So that's Ben Stiller, and the guy's name is Ricky Gervais, I believe his name. He's the English actor. So I have the audio to this, so I thought I'd play this. His thing is, do you remember Bob Newhart?
Yes.
He did he stammered and stuttered a lot, which was a very funny thing. So Ricky does a little bit of this, but I'm going to play this so you can hear this, because it's the same thing. When you have fragmented speaking, people are lost when you're listening to it. So let's see if I can get it to play. And to the very first night.
The Wild West. Boy knows where the dude wants to take over his territory, so he rounded up a posse and put him in the stockade.
Wow! Let's all laugh at me, the comedy night guard. No, is the answer. Sarcasm, back at you with your humour box. I wasn't laughing. Pretending to laugh, if that's what you want, some sort of battle of humour. Do you?
No. I don't want a battle of humor.
No, you don't, because it'd be a bloodbath. Nothing funny about little bighorn. No. I find it about as funny as a fanzist. It's not funny, okay? And I will not stand for this type of blatant... If I'm not clear, tell me. Am I clear?
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think that's funny because he says, if I'm not clear, tell me. Huh? What did you just say? And there's actually a couple of other scenes in there that are a little bit funnier than that, where he doesn't even make sense, and Ben Stiller just looks at him like, okay? So when we're unclear, when we're unable to express our communication, we have fragmented speaking. An articulate individual, a speaker, not only do they have magnetism with their thoughts and words and their presence, but they also speak for the audience. So when I'm able to consciously pull up words, I would speak for the individual when I'm working to make a connection, a synapses between individuals. Now, some individuals who are not articulate or educated, they come up with the slang. You know how slang is? Anybody? And all of a sudden slang takes over and it gives different meanings to different words. So if you're an older individual and you say a word that used to be slang and it's not slang anymore, you kind of get lost, like what just happened. So that's when we can have a little bit of miscommunication. It's kind of like when you're speaking to someone who doesn't speak English and they're trying to figure out. I've spoken to a couple of people whose English is their second language and they're so confused. Because we have really no rhyme or reason to our, I mean, the verbs, in Italian, the verbs, you have the verb and the ending just changes to tell you who did the action. In the English language, it doesn't really change much. It's one of the hardest languages to learn. So when it comes to the language and being fragmented, I'm sorry, I just got lost. I wanted to make sure that I was staying here. Even when it comes to English language, I was going back to the child. So when the child first learns how to speak, even if they say pooter and they're pointing to the computer, you know they want the computer. So they may not use the right word, but they're still having the ability to connect with and sometimes that's what happens when you're in a foreign country. You do this to tell people you want to eat. You do this because you can't hear. Or this means you're searching. So we have other ways of communicating, not just the English language. There's other things that we can implement. So back to the idea of fragmented thinking. What are some of the things that cause us to have fragmented thinking? When we have fragmented thinking, our understanding can be foggy. There's a great cute little example right now happening on TV. It's very funny, where this woman is in the, actually I saw this they have this show called The Funniest Commercials. So this was a commercial. So a woman's in this bikini, she's on this beach, and her boyfriend's sitting there, and she's like, oh my gosh, it's been such a long time since I was able to fit into this bikini. And he goes, yeah, it sure has been. Because he wasn't thinking 100% when he said that. Because what he just told her is she's fat, or she was fat, and now she can fit into the outfit. So when we aren't thinking, when we're not paying attention, we can have fragmented thinking. Now, think of this. How often do you sit and listen 100%? 100% of your mind is engaged in the conversation. I can tell you right now, half of you have left. Already left. I didn't even have to tell you left. You've left. I know you have. You're off thinking about other things, the timing or the movie, or maybe you're thinking of another commercial. We come and go all the time. So having us not be in the present moment creates fragmented thinking. I only pick up one or two words. Creates fragmented thinking. I may not see everything. Creates fragmented thinking. Because remember, the brain is derived by perceptions. So if I don't see the whole picture, I don't hear the whole picture, I'm going to fill in the blanks. You know what fills in the blanks?
Yes.
The logical side. Because my creative side, remember in the movie, it's the creative side that can see the whole picture. So the creative side with the left hand, the left hand does the puzzle just like that because it sees the whole picture. But the left brain cannot see the whole picture, so it gets frustrated. So when my brain cannot see the whole picture, my left one jumps in and says, oh, well, this is what it must be, because it's logical. So it looks, oh, that's it. And we can make assumptions. We may be incorrect. Most of the time we are incorrect. But we perceive that we're right. Now, this is funny too. When the ego, introduce the ego into this, which side do you think the ego belongs?
Left.
The left. I'm guessing the left. I don't know if that's correct or not, but it sounds like it. It's logical, so it's the dominant side. I'm assuming that would be, it's the left side. Although if you're a very strong right personality, a right brain, it could be ego in there too. So I would say whichever hemisphere dominates your being is where your ego lies. I'm guessing. Please, again, I do not have a degree in any of this. This is just layman's terms. My thought is many arguments begin with a fragmented understanding. I said this, you said that. What? That's not what I meant. And then you get into an argument. Because we add emotion. Again, I don't know where emotion exists on this as well, but once you add emotion, it's fuel to the fire. Then we get defensive. I'm right. No, I'm right. And it's not even about the big picture anymore. Now it's about being right or wrong. And whose thought is correct, who saw what. And the thing that I always find very fascinating is, if you ever get into a debate, and then you discover, or the other person discovers that they're right, and you say, oh, you're correct, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. You certainly did. Like, they don't say, oh, don't worry about it. It's always, well, you certainly did, I told you I was right. They always have to have that last little word, I told you I was right. Okay, thank you. So when it comes to understandings, misunderstandings, arguments, many of them are because I have a fragmented thought. We have an assumption, an expectation, or a distraction. We don't see things all the way, we don't have the big picture. Now the word fragment, the actual word, the definition is to break off, to break a piece from, so it's fragmented, like a bone fragment. I have a bone fragment from a broken ankle, so I have a piece of fragment that actually exists in my ankle. Now, those of you who were here last Monday night workshop, I said my ankle popped and I jumped. That's because that piece of bone, it's floating. It got stuck and turned one way, and it can be a little painful, and I have to pop it back out again. So that's a fragment. That's an example of a fragment. Another article I saw this week was children up in Iowa in a creek discovered a mastodon's tooth, which was fascinating because the tooth had the roots still connected to it. But that would be considered fragment too, a part of the jawbone of a mastodon. A mastodon is a mammoth, for those people who don't know that. Everyone knows that, right? You do now. I just completed your picture of a mastodon. So the mammoth, it's a mammoth's tooth, so that's a fragment. So when it comes to something being broken off, if I have a fragmented thought, it's broken off from the original thought, let's say. Now what would the original thought be? Well, let's say I have a sentence right now, and you hear every other word. when you fill in the pieces. You just have fragmented, so your left brain fills in, well, this is what she must have meant. Just like the jibber-jabber of the jibber. Are we clear? Okay. And you can just make your own assumption. Now, when it comes to clarity, sometimes you can have too much information. Anybody in here a lawyer? Oh, good, I can pick on you now. So, lawyers, have you ever had a conversation with a lawyer? They are logistical, logical, and use more words than I've ever known a human being just to say yes or no. I mean, there's like so much information. So that can also cause fragmented thinking. When you have too much information coming at you, you're saturated. Can't get your brain literally, I don't hear it anymore. Now, what I'm doing is I'm just trying to come up with reasons why we have fragmented thinking. Just like the corpus callosum, which creates the continuity between the brains, there are reasons why my mind causes me. I just looked down at my paper, I just saw a sentence that didn't make sense. Oh, it does make sense now. Okay. Have you ever played that game, the telephone, in elementary school? So you all sit in a line, and one person at one end is given a story, and then every person turns and tells the next person the story, tells the next person the story, and then you get all the way down to the end. And when the child stands up, is it identical to the original story? No. Nothing. Sometimes it's absolutely nothing like it. How is that possible? If you all hear the same word, and it gets transferred down, why is it changed? Well, this is where I think fragmented thinking comes into play. So when this story is passed down, you may have used the word door, but then I use the word entrance. And then entrance can turn into a house or a home. We can just change words around. You might say car, and then I'll change it to truck, and truck can be changed to SUV. SUV can be changed to dump truck, which can be changed to tank. I mean, all we have to do is just according to my perception, what you meant. So that's the distinction when we have a proper noun versus a regular noun. So a regular noun, him, he, she, it. Proper noun, President Obama. Instead of a green tree, we would say a eucalyptus, even though that's not. But by the proper is at the title. Now that's clarity. But we don't talk with proper nouns all the time. We generalize. And through generalizing, we can create fragmented thinking, because it's what I heard, remember, based upon my perception. So I hear you say car, oh, my car, oh, that means they had a convertible. So I've now changed the word car to convertible, a black convertible. Oh, I have a black convertible. Oh, no, wait, I have a black Mustang. So we can just change it as we pass this around. So sometimes when you do the telephone thing and you get all the way to the end, not only has the event changed, but the people have changed too. Somehow that manifests. It's a strange event, a very strange event. Now, I'm saying this because I've seen this happen. I've participated in things like that. So my question was, is it all based on bias? I like this, I don't like this. Perception. I like this, I don't like this. So you say this word, I don't like that word, I'm going to change the word. I have facilitators who do this. When they replay back what somebody says in the classroom, they change the word and give the word that they like better. I've done this, where I've changed the word because I think it makes more sense to me, so I'll say it back to you with my words rather than your words. That changes. Sometimes if you change a word, you can change the meaning of the sentence. We know that as well. Now, in Omega 1, Dr. William Glasser, we state this. We say fragmented thinking. When we have fragmented thinking, it means I only see what I want to see and I only hear what I want to hear. That's, again, based upon my perception. So this brain is based upon perceptions. The perceptions are fed to the brain by what I see, what I hear, what I touch, what I smell, what I taste. My 5 senses implement impressions on the brain, creates perceptions. So therefore, Dr. William Glasser says, when I have fragmented thinking, when I'm fragmented in my thoughts, when I'm fragmented, I can only see what I want to see and hear what I want to hear. So if my perception is that this carpet is red, it doesn't matter how many times you tell me it's blue, I will say it's red. Have you ever had a conversation with a colorblind individual? That's intriguing. Are you, Doyle? So is Don Hoffman. That's fun.
I got married the second time. My wife and I had been together for a few months, and I couldn't find my gray suit. So what the hell did you do in my gray suit? She said, you don't have a gray suit. So I've been wearing the damn thing ever since I met you. She said, it's green.
There's another gentleman named Don Hoffman. He's also colorblind, and that's funny. They're in the printing industry. How can you be in the printing industry if you're colorblind? But anyway, I had a conversation with Don one day about the difference between the colors that he had. It was fascinating to me that he really did see things in a different color, like grays were greens, red was not red. Anyway, so my perception is based upon my perception. So my brain sees something, and even if you tell me it's the other thing, I will discount you. I might be polite and say, oh, that's nice, but in my mind, no, I know what I'm talking about, and discount you. So that's how I can have a misconceived, misunderstanding, and fragmented thinking based upon my perception. As I stated, if I don't see the whole picture, my right brain is not engaged, my left brain will fill in the blanks, and I'll fill in the story and make it up. For example, I wrote an article about this in the last newsletter. The plane that crashed in San Francisco. Immediately in the news, the media, we have to know. And what they do is they start making assumptions. I marveled at the NTSB. I don't know if I said that right, the National Transportation Board.
NTSB.
The what?
NTSB.
NTSB, thank you. I marveled at this man. So they got him within an hour. The ex-chairman was up on, and one of the reporters, well, what do you think caused it? And he said, we won't know until we get the black box. Well, you know, what in your opinion? I'm not about to give you my opinion. We will not know until... He was very calm. He didn't last very long because the reporter didn't get what he wanted. But I marveled at him because he was wonderful. He didn't cave into pressure. He wasn't going to jump to conclusions. He knew human beings like to create stories. So we create stories of what happened. And then, of course, you know, they have the eyewitnesses out there. So this one eyewitness said the plane cartwheeled. And the expert, no, couldn't have cartwheeled, not possible, no, they misunderstood, no, they meant it went spinning around. So he corrects the eyewitness. 2 days later, an actual video of the crash emerged on YouTube. Has anyone seen this? It's amazing. The plane almost cartwheeled. It didn't spin around. What happened was, there was a guy, apparently there's a place, Mark's actually been there, there's a place across from the runway that you can clearly see the planes landing. So there was an enthusiast out there recording planes, and he was watching the one plane that was getting ready to take off, and then he saw the other one, and he's like, wait, that's coming in too low. And sure enough, you could see the plane, the nose was way too high, and you could tell it was going to hit the end of the runway. It hit the end of the runway, the tail flies off, the thing is ripped, and as it starts gliding, the plane goes up in the air on its side and then slams back down. So it almost cartwheeled. So even though the expert says, no, it didn't cartwheel, it spun around, this is the way it is, that's because we have to jump to assumptions. We know this is what happened. And then I remember seeing at the very tail end, the tail got ripped off, and there was that green curtain, which was called the air pressure. It keeps the air pressure in the cabin. And the one individual was saying, no one fell out the back of the plane because that thing is intact. As the camera is coming around, clearly showing you this gaping hole in the back of the plane, and the guy says, no, that's intact. Oh, well, I guess not. So what made me laugh about it, sad to think that someone actually got thrown out, which they did. There were several individuals who got sucked out. There was 3 people who were still in their chairs. It was a row of chairs that got sucked out, and they said it was the chairs that actually saved their lives. But they got sucked out the back of the plane, still in their seatbelts, in the row of chairs. It was amazing. I mean, I was quite fascinated to watch this all unfold, knowing I was thinking of fragmented thinking while I was watching this, and getting frustrated with the reporters, but also how everyone has their own perception. The authority steps in. Oh, well, I know. And again, back to the marveling that gentleman refused to give his speculation until you get the black boxes. That to me is a great, I want to say constitution, but I'm not sure if that's the correct word, but integrity. I feel like that's a good sense of integrity, who's someone who doesn't want to spread gossip. They don't want to assume and cause more harm, because that can happen. A rumor can start, causes more harm than what they said didn't even happen in the first place. So, the thing that I also find intriguing about our bias and our fragmented thinking is how the ego kicks in and will discount it even if it's true. No, I have the correct truth. And then we fight over truth. George always used to say, never say to have the truth, because you'll always find a new truth. And sometimes his truths, well, oftentimes, his truths contradicted each other. And so people would say, you just contradicted yourself. He said, yes, I did. And he'd be happy about it because he knew, yeah. But if you understand the whole picture, all truths are valid. Now, let's suppose you have fragmented thinking. I'm going to read this. While reading this sentence, if I were to remove every fourth word, you still might be able to understand the sentence. So, while reading this, if I were to, every fourth, you may be able to, together. You might be able to understand that. But let's say your fragmented thinking is greater than that. If I removed every other word, here's what you have. While this if were removed, fourth, you be it. Welcome to slang. Because that's really what we do. We eliminate other words and just go to that's it. So when it comes to fragmented thinking, we don't have the clear picture. We have a piece of the puzzle. Linda did a really good impact training a couple of months ago, last year actually, I think it was, where she had this large puzzle. It was a floor puzzle, and everyone got a piece, and the pieces were this big. And so with just that piece in hand, you don't have the whole picture, just that little piece of the puzzle. And if you go around and try to connect your piece to other people, you might think people that fit yours, and then through putting them together, you can start assuming what the puzzle was. But until all the pieces come together, you don't have the full picture. And this is the danger of fragmented thinking. If I don't have a clear picture in my mind, how do I clearly communicate? So if I don't have a clear picture in my mind, how do I clearly communicate? Add my own arrogance and ego, and we believe that we do have a clear picture, and you're the reason why you don't understand it. So we get into arguments, well, you're the reason why you can't understand me. I'm saying it perfect. Again, I'm going to go back to this favorite news show of mine, The Big Bang Theory. It's a comedy. And the reason why I love it is because the guys are so geeky and goofy, but they're funny. And they're all brilliant scientists except for one engineer. Howard. Poor Howard gets picked on all the time. Sheldon is the main character. He's above and beyond the smartest of all everyone. He says words I cannot even understand. And he just flows it out. I mean, I know it's an acting and his character and whatnot. He does a really good job. I think he's an excellent actor to be able to just spout this stuff out. And who knows, he might even be making it up, but make it sound like it's real. But in this illustration, so here you have it, Sheldon is unable to communicate simply. He can't say, I would like to do, he'll say, well, the hypothesis of this, and go off in some, so he can't be simplified. But, so that's one thing I was thinking of, is how he gets so confused, and then he gets people, well, he's never wrong, you don't understand, because it's your fault, because you're a Neanderthal or something like that. Like, he'll never take it to him that he can't understand anything. So have you ever gone for sleep, a length of time with no sleep? Anybody ever do that, a length of time with no sleep?
Yes.
That's kind of frightful, a little bit. Now, I have a friend of mine who can't do that very well, and so even though she's up and operating, one time I took my youngest daughter to Vegas for her bridal shower, and it was an overnight trip, so we just flew up there and we were going to fly back, but we got a hotel room just so people, if they wanted to crash, change, take a shower and whatnot. So my friend's with me. It's like 2, 3 in the morning. She doesn't do well. She needs sleep. It's 2, 3 in the morning. We're gambling and whatnot, moving around. Get to the airport. She has no idea what just happened. Even though she's functioning, clueless. Has no idea what just occurred for 3 hours. 3 hours lapse of time. I've had this experience. When I was in college, for 3 years in a row, I did the muscular dystrophy dance-a-thon. It was 30 hours of dancing. So 30 hours, you're up straight, but you're dancing for 30 hours as well. Like every 2 hours, you'd have a 5-minute break, go to the bathroom and whatnot. And then 15 hours into it, they gave us a 2-hour or 1-hour break where you could, go rest, eat, whatnot. But for 30 hours, I was exhausted at the end of that. For 30 straight hours. I've stayed up before for 28, 24, but not 30. 30 was a long time. My mind was fuzzy, foggy. I did goofy things. Like I walked into a wall that was right in front of me, but I didn't see it because I'm thinking of something else. So even though I'm looking right at the wall, I'm thinking of something else, I walk right into the wall. Now, everyone got a big laugh out of that. I didn't. But that's what can happen. When your mind is not functioning properly, you don't see things. I've done this before where I have, what's the one where you don't sleep at night? Insomnia. Where I have bouts of insomnia where I can't sleep. Sometimes I'll go into 2 days, I think it's been lately, where I just can't sleep. So you can't make the connections. And then I find myself making sentences where they make no sense. Like if I'm talking on the phone, I'll say, don't forget to go get the bicycle when I mean watermelon. I know I said the wrong word, but I can't find the right word that I'm looking for. So that's foggy thinking. I saw that a lot with George towards the end when dementia set in. His frustration would be he knew he wanted to say a word, but the wrong word would come out. As a matter of fact, I have a video, the last video I have of him. We were talking, I was videotaping him when he was waking up, and I'm like, all right, well, you ready to start? Do you know who I am? Yes. And are you ready to start a new day? Yes. And then he turns and looks out the door, and then he comes back, and I said, what do you do? And he goes, incoming mail. What does that mean? And then he laughed because he knew that's not what he meant, but he couldn't find the words for what he meant. So it was, I always try to make him laugh about it so he didn't get frustrated, because it would be funny that he would say the wrong words. But then I got to know the words that he was using for what he meant. So those are, that's a good illustration. Anybody ever have where you have a reaction to medication and your mind gets fuzzy too, and you can't quite figure out what's wrong? And then, take another pill, which makes it worse. So those interrupt the synapses, the connections, the neurotransmitters. Medication can interrupt it, sleep can interrupt it. As a matter of fact, now, you can be charged with a DUI if you are driving with lack of sleep. You do not need to be drunk. If you are lack of sleep, you can be held accountable and get a DUI charge for lack of sleep. Now they do this because a lot of truck drivers at night, they don't sleep. They'll try to drive. As a matter of fact, the trucking industry has been changed where you are required to pull over. I think it's after a 12-hour shift. You are required to stop and sleep at least for 8 hours. You cannot be on the road. So I saw this on the Discovery Channel. They have actual truck locations where people can go. You can take a nap, take a shower, sleep, change, eat, but you are required. You have to log in, and you are required to stop so that you do not have sleeping drivers on the road. Can you imagine an 18-wheeler with somebody falling asleep at the wheel? That would be very dangerous. So many things can affect my brain. Again, not paying attention, if I'm overwhelmed and saturated, if I haven't had enough sleep. Diet and nutrition can help as well. If you don't eat enough, you get the same effect as not having enough sleep. You get fuzzy, disorientated. Blood pressure can also affect the brain, where if you have low blood pressure or high blood pressure, the synapses, again, it's all about the synapses and the connection of the brain. So I pose this question. When it comes to the synapses in the brains, being foggy or over-medicated and whatnot, the connections aren't strong. We have weak connections, so that's why we have sentences that don't make sense, but we know we're trying to say something because the connections haven't been fully there. That's fragmented thinking. Imagine you're dropped off in the middle of a forest, and you're given these following guidelines. 10 miles in each direction, there's a different outcome. If you were to go to the east, there is a 100-foot cliff. To the west, a raging river that's a mile wide. To the south, a tribe of cannibals. And to the north, a campsite with a truck to take you back to your civilization. So you have all the information. You're in a forest with a canopy so thick that you cannot see the sun. And you do not have a compass. What do? So you have all the information, but you have no compass, nothing to navigate. So there's a disconnect. It's like having fragmented thinking. Fragmented thinking means you have all the information, but there's no synapses. There's no corpus callosum. What do? Well, you could stand there and starve. You could start out one direction and maybe think that's not the right way and go back the other way. You take your chances and just keep going and greet the cannibals, I don't know, or, jump off the cliff. Without clarity or the whole picture, you'll be lost. That's a picture of fragmented thinking. It doesn't mean you're stupid. Fragmented thinking, you can have great information in your mind, but without a connection or a compass, you're lost. And you cannot clearly communicate. Because that's really what it comes down to. When you have fragmented thinking, you cannot communicate completely. So the next question I have is, can I unfragment my mind? In other words, can I put the pieces back together? Once you cut the corpus callosum, it cannot be reestablished. So if the corpus callosum is cut in my brain, these two hemispheres will never communicate again. Now, fortunately, fragmented thinking is not like a cut corpus callosum. There are some things that we can do to unfragment our mind. I'd like you to do, take a moment, talk to your buddy, and think about what are some things that you could do to reconnect and unfragment your mind. Go ahead, please. May I have your attention, please? Now, I don't have the answer to the question I posed. I have a thought that came up to me, but before I give you what I derived to be a solution, I want to tell you a quick little story. I knew this teenager, came through the teen program, brilliant mind, brilliant, full scholarship to ASU on academics, brilliant, a beautiful young kid, just sweet. He ended up getting involved with hallucinogenic drugs. You may have heard me talk about him before. So I had not seen him in quite some time. The drugs that he got involved in, which were a number of drugs, actually landed him in the insane asylum, which I didn't know they actually still had, but apparently they do. It was psych wards, the psych wards at the hospitals. Because he was very harmful, not only to himself, but he was deemed harmful to society. He tried to kill the mailman because he thought the mailman was a predator or something. Upon his release, he's on antipsychotic drugs now, so he will spend the rest of his life on drugs. When I met him, I want to say maybe 15 years later, now I wrote a letter of recommendation for him for some position that he was on because I truly believed in this kid. Just a beautiful, intelligent, heartfelt kid. If you've heard me tell the stories about Red Black game during the teen program, he was the one that did the teen program Black Black. He's the one who said, we got to go Black Black. He had good vision, clarity, just a beautiful kid. So the next time I saw him, he had dreadlocks. Nothing against dreadlocks, but I'm giving you a big picture. So this clean-cut, all-American cut kid now has dreadlocks. He's like, yo, Anne-Marie, what's up? And I just stood there like, really? Hi. How do I react to that? His connections were off. I could see it. He couldn't keep his eyes straight. He was off talking about tangents that were just, I didn't know where he was going. Now, I'm not sure, perhaps maybe the drugs, the hallucinogenic drugs, he accessed another part and he's unable to communicate it. Because I know in the Indian culture, in the Native American culture, the peyotes, the peyote ceremony, peyote is a drug, that's LSD, to help you connect with another realm. Not to do it every day, but it is a ceremony that is celebrated, I think, as sometime in everyone's lifetime in the culture. So maybe the drugs got him to a place where he's accessing something that we can't understand. But what I do know is that his connections for normally functioning were disconnected. And there's nothing they could do to reconnect them. The antipsychotic drugs just settled down the aggressive part of him, but you could not reestablish those connections. So the child that I knew and I tried to speak to no longer existed. It's like his personality completely changed. And then I thought about people with multiple personalities. Where do those exist? And when you have multiple personalities, you actually have an individual, and I did know somebody, she had 3 personalities, a little girl, a teenager, and an adult, which was very funny. But when she went into that little girl mode, she was like 2 years old. Her voice changed, her demeanor changed, and she was a 2-year-old kid. You could actually feel like you were communicating with a 2-year-old child. It was amazing to me. But in each one of those, the personalities didn't know what the other personality was doing. In multiple personalities, usually there's one dominant one, the left brain, one dominant one, and they all follow under that one dominant one. In many cases, if the dominant one feels like a personality is being threatened, it'll pull that personality out and send an aggressive personality in. Now this has been classified, I've seen this. I haven't done much study on this, but I have done a little bit of study on the multiple personalities. So an individual can have multiple personalities. Each one of those, think about this, if each one of those has their own thought process, there's a picture of fragmented thinking. I mean, a really good picture of fragmented thinking. So how do you join all of those? Well, that is one of psychiatry's challenges. Eventually, what psychiatrists do is they have the personalities meet each other and join. one at a time. They come up and meet each other and join. And there's always the one aggressive one that refuses to. It wants to be in charge. So sometimes what they do is they have 4 or 5 of them come together and kind of gang up, do an intervention. So, intervention in your mind. I thought about the word intervention, though, because this is intriguing to me. The corpus callosum is the mediator between the two brains, the two hemispheres. We can call it the mediator. Mediator is very close. It intervenes. But a mediator, the word mediator, take one letter and add it, you have meditation. So I have mediate, meditate. So I thought this is quite intriguing. Meditation. I wonder if meditation could be a mediator on the spiritual realm. Because when I have fragmented thinking, I don't even operate on the lower levels. So if meditation is an attempt to connect with the higher self, maybe that's the way that I can mediate the conflict of my fragmented thinking, is go up to my higher self. There is a philosophy George always used to state that if you wanted to deal with a problem, you have to go one level up. You never deal with the problem on the level of the problem. You always go one level up. So one level up from the thinking is what? Intuition. For all of you who didn't know that. It's intuition. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, violet. So take the 7 levels. We have physical, emotional, mental. So the mental's in charge of the lower aspects of me. Intuition is the bridge that takes me from the lower to the higher realm. So perhaps meditation is a way for me to reconnect the fragmented thinking. So when I was thinking about meditation, how many people in here practice meditation? All right. When you first started practicing meditation, what was your biggest obstacle?
Thoughts.
The thoughts. And your thoughts, were they congruent? No, they bounced around as random as anything. Welcome to your fragmented thinking. That's your thoughts. When you daydream, it's the same thing. You let your mind go amok, and you have all thoughts. Have you ever tried to follow your thoughts? How did you get from one thought to another when you let your mind go? This is a good challenge for you to try to do that. I actually did it one time, 5 minutes. I had 25 different thoughts. And I didn't write them down as I was having the thoughts. At the end of 5 minutes, I attempted to track them down, and I counted out at least 25 different thoughts that my mind went to, just being silent. So my mind, my greatest enemy, greatest challenge, this thing right here, fragmented thinking everything. So with the meditation, I find it curious that my first and foremost opponent is my mind, my fragmented thoughts. But once I conquer that, has anybody been able to conquer that in your meditation? Woo, some of you? Not predominantly. Yeah, you got to be a guru to do that. Years and years of that. However, when you do, those few moments that you do, what do you end up with?
No thought.
No thought, and how do you feel? Serene. Peaceful, calm. Do you feel like you have a sense of clarity, maybe? Focused. Yeah, focus, clarity. Sometimes inspiration comes to us. So in those few moments, we can excel past our fragmented thinking and reach a place of peace, a place that we're striving for. The fragmented thoughts don't give us peace. My thinking won't give me peace. I remember the first time I encountered the philosophy of controlling your mind. It's only pain. You can control your mind. What? I'm experiencing pain! And so I became aware of the more you focus on the pain, the more painful it was. But if I put my thought on something else, the pain decreased. I learned this as a very little girl. Very little girl. You may have heard me tell this story. I would have a guardian angel, let's say, and after some beating, I'd be in my room crying, and I'd hear this voice, Anne-Marie, sing. And I'm like crying, puppy eyes, I'm in pain, I don't want to sing. And my little guardian angel would say, Anne-Marie, sing. Now, I never got it until I started understanding the brain. Remember I said that music, the music center is on the opposite side of the speech pattern, on the opposite side. I don't know if that's where it is, but we're just going to say that. So I'm in the speech logic, I'm in pain, I'm in hurting, and by sending my brain, my thoughts, from the left side to the right side, I started singing. And by singing, do you know what happened? I didn't experience pain. It went away. It diminished. Not only did it diminish, but I felt better. I laughed. I was laughing at the thought of a child sitting in the middle of the room crying, singing. Because the song I was told to sing was, oh, give me a song to sing, oh, give me a song to sing, oh, give me a song to sing and I'll be happy as a king. Anybody know that one? Yeah, that's an oldie but a goodie. So I would laugh because that's the stupidest song I've ever heard, but the more I sang it, the better I felt. So at the age of 5, 6, 7, I'm being taught to go from my left brain to my right brain, to change or connect both, because when I'm in the pain, I'm focused on this side, I'm out of balance. By going to the right side, it brought balance to me. I still felt the pain, but it wasn't as severe. So I learned by going back and forth. I mean, I literally didn't say, all right, I'm going to go to my right brain. I didn't discover that until years later when I started studying with George and the brain and the ability that we have in the two hemispheres, that when you go to the music center, you don't experience fear. You don't experience fear when you go to the music centers. Now, I've had this experience where I've tried to go to the music center while I was in fear and it didn't work. I still had the fear. Kayaking with killer whales. I tried to sing. I couldn't think of a song. Not even giving me a song to sing was in my mind. I finally got Twinkle Twinkle, but I didn't even get Twinkle Twinkle out. I'm like, Twinkle, Twinkle. I don't remember the words. I mean, so sometimes the fear can be so much that it actually inhibits you to get to the other side. But I did. Eventually, I got to the other side. It's funny, I keep saying getting to the other side, like crossing over. I'm crossing over. Perhaps maybe that's what death is. We go from here to the other side, or from here to the other side. So with my fragmented thinking, the idea that I came up with was meditation. Meditation, to me, acts like a mediator between my fragmented thoughts. Can I repair the connections? I'm not sure. But it does bring me to a place of peace. It brings me to a place of compassion, inspiration, creativity. It gets me out of the rapid fire thinking and gives me to a place where I have focus, as you said. I have focus there. And when I have focus, there's clarity. And when I have clarity, then I can express myself with clarity. When I don't have clarity, I do not express myself with clarity. Yes, ma'am?
Just a side note, when I can't meditate to get that, if I have a job or something, I could slow down by breathing, by centering on the breathing, and that'll do.
Breathing is a form of meditation. There is a meditation where it goes to focus on your breathing. So that is one very quick meditation that you can do. There are some meditations where it's just run through the colors real quick, or you listen to sounds, try to count the different sounds that you have in that you're hearing. But it brings anything that brings you back to the present moment can be considered a form of meditation. But that's quite true. The breathing is an excellent aspect or easy way to begin to meditate and settle yourself down. So in conclusion, I have no conclusion. I have the understanding that I have fragmented thinking. And when I'm involved in my fragmented thoughts, my communication is fragmented. My experience of life is fragmented because this is based upon perception. And if I'm having fragmented thoughts, my perceptions are fragmented and I'm not enjoying my experience. So therefore, can I change the experience? Absolutely. How do I do this? Meditation. Perhaps meditation. Rising above my brain and connecting with something other than my fragmented thoughts. In other words, rising above my 5 senses to connect with my higher senses. For those of you who know the higher senses that George often talked about. That could be a way to reestablish or settle down the fragmented thoughts. Will I always have fragmented thinking? I'm assuming I will, since I lack the ability to stay in the present moment. I'm assuming I will always have fragmented thinking until I become a master at my meditation and staying in the present moment. I'm expecting I will always have fragmented thinking. Does that mean I will suffer for the rest of my life? Perhaps. But I don't have to suffer long. Once I recognize it, I can swing to the other side. But the last thing I want to mention, since I said I had no conclusion, I'd like to give you a challenge, if you would. For the next 2 weeks, or before we have the next workshop, I want you to think about the frustration, fragmented thinking, and changing your thoughts to song. See if, when you're feeling frustrated or upset, start singing. See if the singing changes your demeanor. Doesn't matter what you sing. Pick your favorite song, hum a tune, doesn't matter. but see if the actual art of switching from thinking to singing, speaking to singing, affects you. So when we come back in 2 weeks, I'd like to hear you guys check in on that one. That's going to be your challenge, okay? Thank you very much. Have a good 2 weeks. We'll see you in August.
Thank you.